Every funeral in town had one familiar face no one could identify. People whispered that he was cursed. The truth was far more heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Before we continue, here's a small request. If you're enjoying this story, please like, follow, and subscribe to stay connected and never miss a new story. The stranger attended every funeral in town for one hidden reason. The small town of Maple Ridge had a mystery that lasted for nearly 20 years. At every funeral, whether it was for a beloved teacher, a retired firefighter, a lonely veteran, a young child, or even someone with no surviving family, the same quiet man stood in the back wearing a dark suit and holding a single white lily. He never spoke to anyone, never joined the family, and always disappeared before the service ended. Children grew up seeing him. Adults exchanged theories about him. Some believed he was a ghost watching over the town. Others thought he was a retired detective carrying secrets from an old, unsolved case. A few even claimed he was related to every family in town. Yet no one knew his name, where he lived, or why he never missed a single funeral. Year after year, through freezing winters, heavy rainstorms, and scorching summer afternoons, he quietly appeared, bowed his head in silence, placed a white lily near the casket, and vanished before anyone could thank him. One rainy autumn afternoon, the town's oldest newspaper reporter, Emily Carter, decided she would finally uncover the truth. She followed the stranger after another funeral, expecting to discover something mysterious or even frightening. Instead, she watched him stop at a small cemetery bench where he carefully opened a worn leather notebook that looked decades old. Every page contained handwritten names, dates, and heartfelt memories about people who had passed away. Some entries were only a few lines long, while others stretched across several pages, describing acts of kindness, childhood dreams, military service, favorite songs, family traditions, and moments that made each life unique. Emily introduced herself, and after a long silence, the man quietly agreed to tell his story. His name was Daniel Brooks. 30 years earlier, his wife and young daughter had died in a terrible highway accident. Because they had recently moved to town, only a handful of people attended their funeral. Daniel never forgot the unbearable pain of seeing so many empty chairs surrounding the caskets of the two people he loved most. On that heartbreaking day, he made himself a promise that would shape the rest of his life. He vowed that no one in his town would ever leave this world without at least one person standing beside them in respect and love. From that day forward, Daniel attended every funeral. Before each service, he spent hours learning about the person who had passed away. He visited libraries, read newspaper archives, talked with neighbors, pastors, teachers, former co-workers, and anyone willing to share a memory. He believed every life deserved to be remembered for more than just the date it began and the date it ended. Whenever a funeral had only a few mourners, Daniel quietly shared stories with the grieving family so they would know their loved one had touched more lives than they realized. If a family couldn't afford flowers, he secretly paid for them. If a child had lost a parent, he left anonymous donations for school supplies or birthday gifts. Sometimes he repaired broken grave markers without telling anyone. Other times he visited forgotten graves simply to clean away weeds and place fresh flowers there. He never wanted recognition because he believed true compassion asked for nothing in return. Emily was deeply moved. With Daniel's permission, she published his story in the Sunday newspaper. The article spread far beyond Maple Ridge, reminding thousands of readers that kindness often wears an ordinary face. Within weeks, funerals across the town began to change. Neighbors attended services for people they had never met. Local florists donated flowers to struggling families. Restaurants prepared free meals after memorial services. High school students volunteered to help elderly mourners, and veterans proudly stood beside the graves of fellow veterans they had never known. What had once been the quiet mission of one grieving man slowly became the shared tradition of an entire community. Years later, when Daniel Brooks passed away peacefully in his sleep, news of his death reached people across the state. On the day of his funeral, the church parking lot overflowed with cars, and every pew was filled long before the service began. Thousands gathered outside carrying a single white lily in their hands, the same flower Daniel had carried to every funeral for decades. Many of those people had never met him personally, but they had been inspired by his example. Families he had comforted, children he had helped, veterans he had honored, and strangers whose loved ones had never been buried alone all came together to say goodbye. For the first time in decades, there was no lonely stranger standing quietly in the back of the church, because everyone present had become the compassionate person Daniel had always hoped the world would be. The greatest acts of kindness are often the ones performed quietly, expecting nothing in return. A single compassionate person can inspire an entire community to care for one another. Daniel Brooks spent his life making sure that no grieving family ever had to face their darkest day completely alone. He never sought recognition, applause, or gratitude, only the comfort of knowing that every life deserved to be honored with dignity. In the end, the stranger everyone once questioned became the man an entire town could never forget, proving that the smallest acts of compassion can leave the greatest legacy for generations to come. This is the end of the story,